This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Matthew Jarvis is not a magician, yet there are those that come to him when they're about to retire and expect him to make a small amount of retirement savings last for 30 years. Matthew is a certified financial planner whose clients are exclusively retired or within 5 years of doing so, with at least $500,000 saved up. Depending on your current lifestyle, $500,000 might seem like a lot of money or very little to last for 30 years. And that's the thing about retirement planning. It's very specific to the individual or couple and what they intend to do with those next 30 years. The truth is, everyone's afraid of running out of money, and there's no shame in that. What's important is that you talk to someone about it before it's too late. Though he's still a young man of 36, Matthew has been able to build Jarvis Financial into a very successful business since he started in the industry in the early 2000s. He currently manages over $115 million in assets for his clients and has structured his business in a way that allows him to take over 80 days of vacation every year, spending quality time with his 3 kids while still providing full service to his clients. Matthew joined me from the Seattle, Washington area to tell his personal finance story.
My very first personal finance memory, at least the most vivid one, was when my brother and I set up our first lemonade stand in front of our house. And we had, I seem to recall we had made some astounding $20 that day selling lemonade at 50 cents a cup. And he and I were so excited that we were going to split this $20 50-50 between the two of us. And then my mom comes and says, "Wow, boys, great job. Now you need to pay me back for all the supplies that you used."
And it was, what, $30?
Yeah, she had detailed out, how many cups we used and how much each cup cost and how much lemonade we had used and how much the lemonade cost and the napkins.
That's
and
awesome.
A spreadsheet drawn out of how much we had owed her. And I don't recall what it was, how much we owed her, but it definitely took the thunder out of our sales that we owed her.
Wait, how much was the napkin? Do you remember how much?
I don't recall the numbers. I can remember so vividly this piece of paper she wrote out saying, you had used 3 packets of my napkins and that cost me this. And you used half of the 10-gallon jug of Country Time lemonade from Costco and you owe me back for that.
Well, your mom sounds awesome. Was she in the finance business at all, or what did she do?
No, not at all. My whole childhood, she was a stay-at-home mom, but she was just super great with numbers.
Yeah.
At the time I was pretty resentful to that lesson, but it stuck with me. And man, I don't start any business now without knowing all of the numbers inside and out.
I'm assuming she would have managed the household finances as well.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. I was pretty young at the time, so it wasn't a discussion we had. But she was very much, when I had my paper round or my mowing lawns in the neighborhood, she was very diligent about, all right, well, how much is this costing, and how much gas are you using in the lawnmower, and all of those things. In fact, I remember the lawnmower broke one time. I don't even remember why it broke, but I remember I got stuck with half the bill for getting it fixed because I was the one using it the most.
Okay, so these are like really good early financial lessons, like, you broke it, you bought it, sort of thing, and the gross doesn't matter. You guys had your $20 gross, but you netted out a whole lot less, right?
Yeah, and I don't even recall what we had ended up netting out. But you're right, that's incredibly valuable. I mean, as you know, I work with a lot of financial advisors around the country, and a lot of times they get really hung up. And this applies for all business owners, large or small. They get hung up on that gross number, and then you start saying, well, how much are you actually taking home? I mean, what's the take home after expenses? And the number I really like to look at is kind of what's your take home once we account for your time.
Yes.
So let's look at your net, and then let's divide it by how much you're working, and are you really making any money here? Or are you just working yourself to death for pennies?
That's smart too, because that's something it's not really tangible in that it's a cost that you have to pay. It's the opportunity cost. How much is your time worth? You got to do that calculation to find out. Maybe I could be I could be working a part-time job, retail, and make more money.
Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, you want to be aware of it, right? And the easiest way to do that is to simply divide the amount of money you made over any period of time, a month, a year, and divide that by the number of days or hours that you worked, right? And that kind of gives you a ballpark. And personally, that's one of the numbers I track most is what's my revenue per hour that I work over the course of a year.
That's awesome. So, where did you head next? So wait, so you got that money? You got your money from the lemonade stand.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you would do with money at that time? Or were you a spender or are you a saver?
I was never much of a saver. In fact, my kids now are much better savers than I was then. I was never much of a saver. It would just sort of go from I would make it and then I would spend it, which would give me an incentive to make some more. And so I was always working odd jobs in the neighborhood, a lot of mowing lawns, a lot of babysitting, lemonade stands from time to time. As I got older, I worked for farmers that lived in the area. We lived in kind of a rural country town.
Okay, what'd you do? What kind of farm work did you do?
The guy that I worked for most, he had a ton of horses, and so it was mostly shoveling horse manure and other such things.
All right.
Yeah. Making a solid $5 an hour.
I haven't published it yet, but this is the second conversation I've had where someone's first or second job was revolving around shit of some kind. Yeah.
Didn't know if we were able to use that kind of language on your podcast.
Oh, yeah, no,
that's a lot of horseshit.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Maybe we could keep the F words down. I don't know, but the
I guess I won't tell you about that other job I had.
I hardly, yeah. That hopefully it's much later in your life, and before you were married.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, what is it? I guess they talk about we got to pay our dues when we start by shoveling shit, but literally you did. And the other person who I don't want to spoil the podcast. I think it might be coming up before yours, but he had to empty out a bunch of frozen shit in porta potties.
Oh wow! Yeah,
he had to
I didn't
melt it.
that.
He had to melt it out of there because it was left over in the winter and from the season. It was just like the worst thing that you could ever imagine. So okay, so you started out doing that, and it's just pocket money. Is this saving for school money or anything like that?
No, I was not early on. I was not good at saving. I would earn it and I would spend it, and I would earn it and I would spend it.
What are you buying? What are you spending all your money on?
Man, I wish I could even remember. Obviously, it wasn't memorable. It was just junk.
Yeah, like stuff or like food and like were you drinking or how old are you at this time?
Well, let's see. How old was I at this time? I mean, when I was working at the farmer, I must have been 15 or 16. So then I got a car, and that sunk a lot of money in gas.
You had bought it. Or you monthly payments?
I bought it. Yeah. I think my first car was $400. It was a
what?
86 Chevy Citation. If you want to look up the ugliest car ever made, Chevy Citation.
But 400. I mean, I would drive a cardboard box on wheels if that's all I had to pay. But you had to keep. Was there a lot of maintenance then, other than the gas?
No, of course there was. Yeah, it was a rolling wreck. But I loved it. I had auto shop in high school, and I thought it was
good
to fix it. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. And then as I got a better job, I just kind of got more expensive hobbies. I started out of high school. I worked full-time as a mechanic at car dealerships. And for my age, I was making pretty decent money. And then I got a girlfriend, and I spent all that money on my girlfriend, which was great. So
yeah, I mean, that's how it works, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah.
So did you have any plans at that point to go into anything else? Like, I mean, you're in the financial planning space now. But
I didn't. When I came out of high school, my parents were really hard on me to go to college, and I was a little bit rebellious, and so I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. And a friend had offered me a job working at his car dealership, and I thought, I like fixing cars. This is a lot of fun. So for about 5 years, I did that, and I had a great time. I still spent every penny that I made, and then I eventually decided I didn't want to work on cars long term. It was a fun hobby when I was a teenager, but it wasn't a career for me.
Did it start to get physically difficult, or what made you realize that you didn't want to keep doing it?
Yeah, I mean, all the guys I worked with, so in the realm of auto mechanics, and only people that are auto mechanics will get this, in the realm of auto mechanics, working at a car dealership, like a Chevrolet dealership or Cadillac dealership, that's kind of like the top of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was working just by chance. And even those guys, they're all in their 40s and their 50s, and their hands are broken up and their backs are broken up, and they weren't making any more money than I was. When I was 18 or 19, I'm making the same amount of money that they were at 50.
Okay, so it flattens out.
It flattens out.
Flattens
really
out, and it takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
you
and I
went.
gotta admit, the thing that really got me is this: there's just no respect for the trades,
Okay.
whether that's mechanics or, and I have a ton of respect for the trades, but
Yeah,
there's no
it's
respect
too
for the trades.
bad
No, it
that
really is.
exists because it's such valuable work, and the people only realize this when like I got a flat tire, I was on the side of the road, or my
Yeah.
windshield that need to be replaced, and I can't do that stuff myself. You might be able to do it, especially if you had a garage.
And the trades are a totally, in my mind, they're a totally respectable profession. You can make a very good living, and we could really get on a tangent here about how the public school system really only has two outlets, right? You either go to college or you drop out,
Yeah.
and no accommodation for anything else. And the trades are such a vital part of our economy.
Well, they're looked
But all
down
right,
as like the fallback option or
that's right, that's right.
the
If you're not
plan
smart enough for
B.
college, you go into the trades, and
And
nothing could be further from the truth.
I mean, you're an entrepreneur and I am as well. And what I'm realizing the more I talk to people is, I don't know, I just feel like we're going about this thing the wrong way. Like if someone wants to go into academia, fine. If you want to be
Oh, sure.
in science, if you want to be a scientist or you want to do a professional thing or whatever. But for a lot of people, they go like, I kind of feel like there shouldn't even be a degree, like a university degree in business. Business should be go out and run a business, and maybe here we'll give you some or come in. It should be just internships. I just feel like I don't know. I mean, it was valuable in a way. I got to learn a bit of stuff, but I didn't do anything, and that's the downside, right? I mean, you're out there working in a business. You probably learn more about business working at a car dealership.
Yeah, I learned a lot about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And running lemonade stands.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? And so I think I don't know. I just this is definitely a rant about the value of, especially for you guys, a university degree. I mean, what are you spending these days for an Ivy League degree?
Yeah, I mean for an Ivy League degree, yeah. I had a client, her son just finished at Stanford, right, which was real prestigious
Okay,
Ivy
yeah,
League, and it was $50,000 a year
yeah.
tuition. And so, a 4-year degree, that's $200,000. That's a big hole to fill.
Yeah, and if you're not an athlete or whatever else they might give scholarships for, maybe academic scholarships, right? If you're really smart, how are you paying for this? Is a Sally Mae thing? Is that how do people pay for this?
Boy, that's most people, a lot of student loans, right? And then you're coming out of college with this huge debt, and then you still got to find a job that will come anywhere close. And again, we could have a whole tangent on that,
Yeah,
people
exactly.
going into college and not even thinking about, boy, am I actually going to be able to find a job that could ever pay back this debt that I'm incurring?
Well, that was so. Was any of that part of your rebellion against going to school, or were you just
I wasn't
doing the
that smart
opposite
at the
of mom and
time.
dad? Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Okay.
I wasn't that smart at the time. I sort of luck over skill is my mantra.
So what did you decide to do after the 5 years? Then where'd you end up?
Yeah, so after that, my dad had really been leaning on me to come work at his financial planning practice, which really at the time, well, it was mostly kind of an insurance practice at the time.
Okay.
And so I thought, well, all right, I'll give that a go. And he and I sort of struggled along at that for about 5 years. So this was like 2003 to 2008 until the financial crisis hit. And then, as fate would have it, at the same time as the financial crisis hit, Dad ran into some really serious health issues, which he's since recovered from. But at the time, it forced him almost overnight to have to retire from the business.
Oh, really?
And so, right in the depths of the financial crisis, as we're not making any money, suddenly he leaves, and it's just me.
Okay.
I thought, well,
So
I mean, I could leave too, or I can try to turn this thing around. And I was very successful at turning it around, and I run a great practice now.
but it took a bunch of years, though. How long did it take for you to really turn it
Oh
around?
man, you know what? It only took me 2 years to turn it around.
Oh, nice.
It just put my back against the wall. You have those moments
Mm-hmm.
where you all fear goes away because you're just so desperate that all fear goes away, and you're like, all right, I'm just going to do this. For me, I thought I'm just going to do this. I'm already failing, right? So worst case is I'm going to go out of business, which I think is inevitable. So I might as well do all those things I was afraid to do.
So it's just trying. Yeah, it's a really interesting place to be in, right? Where
Yeah.
the only place to go is further down. So might as well take the risk.
That's right. I
And
might as well
and
run down and maybe I'll bounce out.
and what were you risking at this point? So were you spending some money to do like more marketing or just trying different initiatives?
I was quickly running out of available credit. So we
Okay.
were losing money hand over fist, and the end, there's only so much money people will lend to you, for better and worse. And the end of that was coming up very quickly. So it was, boy, I'm already in deep trouble. I can't just walk away from this. I'm already in deep trouble. Maybe I can get this turned around before we run out of money.
And were clients leaving too at that time? Because I guess does everybody blame the financial planner or the people who are investing there? Because in the States, and correct me if I'm wrong. So
Sure.
to do financial planning, you have to have your CFP designation. Is that right?
Unfortunately, you don't. To do financial planning in the state, yeah, anybody can hang up a shingle and call themselves a financial planner. Yeah, it's unfortunate. England's got that figured out. Australia's got that figured out. The States and apparently Canada are a little slow on that.
But that doesn't include the investment bit, financial planning and investing
There's
money.
like a real nominal requirement. You got to pass a relatively simple exam to get a license to do it, but
Like a securities course or something like that.
it's still far too low.
Okay, so you and do most CFPs in the States also sell investments or invest money for their clients, or do they?
Yeah, I would say the majority do. That's sort of anecdotal, but most are doing investments as well as planning.
Yeah, because we have a lot of I'm a personal finance coach. I have a registered retirement consultant designation, but I'm not a CFP, and there is a CFP designation. And then I have planning as part of my my coaching, but it's not. I don't call myself a planner or anything, right?
Sure.
I'm just sort of guiding people along, right, pointing them in the right direction, and sending them to others to invest, and that actually people who are registered to sell investments,
Sure.
and to people who are more of a fiduciary. And I noticed on your website you have a whole fiduciary section, and maybe you could talk about first what that means and why that's important.
Fiduciary is a really old term. It's a legal term, which in essence means that you're going to put your client's interest ahead of your own, and that any conflicts of interest that exist, because there are always conflicts, that you'll disclose those in advance. That's sort of the crux of it.
Sounds like common sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's what most people assume is going on.
Yeah.
Because when you go to your doctor or your attorney or your accountant, those professions are all bound by law to put their clients or their patients' interests before their own. You wouldn't expect that your doctor is the one making the medication that he's selling to you.
That's right. You expect a little bit of a disconnect there between those two things, but you're saying that's not necessarily the case in your profession?
That's correct. In finance, it's not the case. So unless you have in writing, not a verbal assurance, but unless you have in writing for someone that they're acting as a fiduciary, you can count that they have some pretty serious conflicts of interest going on.
So what would be an example of a major conflict, maybe that you've seen in the past, or maybe were you guys ever doing that in the past and you corrected it?
Yeah. Well, so back like in the 90s, it was there wasn't really any way to reduce those conflicts. So the way the compensation worked in the 90s is someone would buy an investment, a mutual fund or something, and it would behind the scenes pay a commission to the person who sold it.
Yeah.
Sort of like a salesman at a used car lot or something. But there was no disclosure of it. So clients didn't know how much they were paying, and they would sort of get under the impression that Joe or Jane Advisor was recommending the best investment. But what could be really happening is that Joe or Jane Advisor was really just recommending the one that paid them the most, or that would buy them that fancy vacation trip, or whatever the case is. And then some investment firms, which we'll not name, but everyone would recognize the names, they were selling to their clients investments that they were creating. In fact, part of the issue that exacerbated the financial crisis is these big investment firms, they knew that all these mortgages were going sideways and they didn't want them anymore. So they started dumping them on their clients, saying, hey, you really should buy these. And what they weren't saying is, hey, you should buy them because we need someone to buy them from us, right? We want to get rid of this crap. And it's you're the sucker.
Wow. So it was the trusted advisors who were really offloading these, where they packaged a bunch of mortgages together and sold them bits of them off, right?
That's correct. Yeah, because the banks started seeing it first. They're like, oh boy, nobody's making their mortgage payments on all this crap mortgages. We need to get rid of these things or we're going to get stuck with them. And they started dumping them onto their clients under the guise of, hey, we're your trusted advisor. You should buy these things. And they didn't disclose that they were the ones selling them.
I wrote a little bit of a post on the financial crisis because, even since 2008, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to explain in plain words exactly what happened, right? If you're talking to somebody, what exactly happened, and you try to get them through it, and you're like, oh, people were getting mortgages and they shouldn't have, and then the people couldn't pay them, like you just said, right? But the National Film Board of Canada put together this kind of cool interactive, it's like a little chat bot that guides you through, and there's videos and stuff. So I wrote a little blog about that, and it's called How to Create a Financial Crisis. And it goes through all the steps that you would have to go through to recreate what happened, and there's like so many people involved, and they're all doing the wrong thing basically, right?
Yeah, it was everybody was doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, just all at once. And so I mean, in a way, the crisis was a good thing. It was terrible for a lot of people, but it was good for regulation, I guess, right?
I hope so. We'll see when the next one comes
Yeah.
around. I mean,
but they're not allowed to do that anymore, right? They're not allowed to do do the subprime mortgages, and are they?
It's coming back. Everything goes in cycles.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
and it'll be something else next time.
Sure. Okay.
It happened in the early '90s with the savings and loans in the United States. It happened in the mid '90s with hedge funds.
So they're always trying to do they're always scheming. There's always somebody scheming.
Oh yeah, there's always somebody scheming, right? And there's always politicians willing to assist in the scheme. But kind of to translate this back to your listeners in today's world, I mean, really what you've got to make sure you're doing is understanding how the person is being compensated.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So everybody's always getting paid, right? And you just want to make sure you know how they're getting paid. Right? Are you paying them a fee for their coaching, right? Or are they, if they say, hey, don't worry about it, I'm getting paid by the company. Well, that's really a myth, because the company's paying them with your money. And everybody needs to make a living. You just need to understand how are they getting paid, and how could that negatively influence the advice they're giving you.
I will get referral fees for if I refer my clients to investment people, right?
Sure.
And that, if I didn't disclose that you would say that was a conflict. That might be a conflict of interest because I'm not telling people. Is that?
Yeah, if you didn't disclose that, if you said, hey, I think you should go work with Dave down the street, and then you don't mention that Dave pays you for that, that could be a conflict of interest, because maybe, and this is not specific to you, Bo, of course, but maybe you're recommending Dave because he's paying you and not because he's the best for your clients.
Yeah. So how does one know? How does somebody know? Just to keep using me as an example, how does somebody know that I'm not, like, let's say I refer them to a robo-advisor, right? And the robo-advisor pays me a little bit of percentage. Doesn't cost the client anything. How do they know that I'm not just doing that? I'm not referring to them because they're paying me. I'm, like, personally, just to give my perspective, I'm referring them to the robo-advisor because it's a good product for them.
Yeah.
But how do you know to trust someone? Like, how would someone know to trust me? What would you say about that?
Well, I mean, I would start by saying the fact that you're willing to disclose it gains a lot of trust in mind, right? Because it's impossible to eliminate conflicts of interest, right? Let's
you got to make money, right?
Yeah, everybody always everywhere has some kind of conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And so I think the key is just to have the integrity to disclose that, and then it really becomes on you. Well, you as the provider or as the consumer, right? Do I trust this person that their advice is not being slighted by this conflict?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it really just comes down to having an open and a candid conversation about what's going on, right? And
correct.
And for example, like, I would refer to robo-advisors because they're uncomplicated and they have very low fees, right?
Yeah, I refer lots of people to Vanguard. I don't get any compensation for that, but if they offered it to me, I'd probably take it. I send them a lot of business.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Why wouldn't you try to work out some kind of a referral deal with them? Is it because that's not your core business? Yeah,
that's not my core business.
Because you have investments of your own.
In our firm, we do it all internally, and a lot of other things. But people that aren't a good fit for our firm, I say, you really ought to go check out Vanguard. They've got this great Dial a CFP program. They're a good group to work with.
And is it those people who don't sort of meet your criteria for clients?
Yeah, that's correct. So I work almost entirely with people that are retired and that have done a really good job saving money. So if somebody comes to me in their 20s and they say, oh, wait, Matthew, I really want to save for retirement, I say, listen, you should call up Vanguard, or go online, actually, don't call them up. Go online, set up an account with Vanguard, buy what they call a target date fund. It's just set up based on when you hope to retire, and everything's handled for you.
No, I had one of those when I worked for a corporation. They just it was like a 2045 fund, which is when I would be 65. And that's it just slowly kind of changes as I get older, and it rebalances itself to be safer as I get older, right? That was those are probably the simplest. But the fees on these, though, like does Vanguard have a better one? Because I remember the fees are probably closer to 2% on the one the mutual fund that I was given.
Yeah, so target date funds run the whole gambit, just like any mutual fund or investment fund. There's great ones and there's really lousy ones. Inside of 401k or so American retirement accounts, they're pretty lousy in general because you don't have a choice, right? If you work for ABC company,
they just pick the fund.
I guess ABC is a company, so let's say XYZ company.
That's probably a company too.
Yeah, they just pick the investments for you, and you don't have a lot of choices. So that you're kind of limited on. But if you go to like a Vanguard, they're going to have some very inexpensive ones if you're going direct with them. Theirs are always some of the cheapest in the industry, at least in the States.
And this is if somebody were to do this, say on their own, they would open a brokerage account, and then they would go and purchase these themselves. If they wanted to do that, which, if anybody has any inkling to manage their own investments, then that's not so difficult. There's a lot of how-tos on the web and that kind of thing, couch potato methods where you can just buy indexes like this, right?
Yeah, and the Vanguard stuff is almost entirely indexes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's one way. And then the other robo-advisors, you pay them a little bit, they do the picking for you, and they balance everything out, and they don't promise crazy high returns, but they're going to promise average returns. Where do you fit in there? What about yours? Like, just to speak to your pre-retirement or retirement clients.
Yeah, so like I said, essentially all my clients are retired, so they've saved up all this money right over the course of their career, and they're trying to say, all right, how do I take this big lump sum of money, be it a few $100,000 or a few million? How do I turn this into an income, right? How do I turn this lump sum into a monthly paycheck? And then so our job is to facilitate that and then deal with all the other tax and logistical issues that go along with that.
So you're investing in pretty safe stuff for them?
Yeah, we're doing well. So we use index funds, but it's when you retire, let's say you retire at 65, which is sort of the average retirement age.
Yeah,
you still got 30 years ahead of you. That's a long time, right? 3 decades.
It's a lot longer than it used to be, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it keeps getting longer. So you've got 3 decades conservatively ahead of you. That's a long time to get a lump sum of money to last. So it's got to stay pretty heavily invested just to keep up with inflation.
Okay, yeah, and so you have investments that are geared towards beating inflation by just a little bit, or actually getting returns so that it can last a lot longer?
Yeah, we've got to stay pretty heavily invested in equities, in publicly traded companies, so that we get that long-term growth that we need.
So, but is there a risk for someone who's 65 and no more money is getting put in? You're just dealing with a lump sum, right?
Yeah, so huge risk, right? You've got to, what if you retired in 2007 and at least the U.S. markets fell 57%.
We probably went along with that, yeah.
Yeah, I think the markets all around the world were about that same place, right? They were all just horrible. You've got to have a plan in place for how are you going to handle that, and that's. The people who got in the most trouble were the ones that were surprised that happened. A handful of people saw it coming. At least they claimed to have seen it coming. But we see these every 5 to 10 years. It's just how the economic cycle works.
Well, let's say, just take an example. So,
yeah, sure.
I'm 65. I got $1 million. I don't know.
Yep.
Is typically would $1 million be okay for a person these days? What do you see if they want to live 30 years?
It all depends on the hole in the bottom of your nest egg, right? Okay. It's all. I got clients that I got a couple. They were both school teachers, which maybe school teachers get paid well in Canada. They don't get paid well in the States. They had just on diligent savings saved up $2 million between them, which is amazing. So they saved this money and they never really touched it in retirement. They had a little teacher's pension and their Social Security, and that was what they lived on. They just had really simple lives. On the other hand, I had a fellow come in the other day, a doctor, and he needed to, due to some injuries, he needed to retire right away. And he says, Matthew, I've saved a lot of money. I said, well, boy, how much? He says, $1 million. I said, well, that's great. That is a lot of money. How much income do you need? And he says, I just need $200,000 a year of income. And I say, well, let me do some simple math for you.
Yeah, simple math. Yeah.
200,000 goes into $1 million about 5 times.
Yeah.
Actually, exactly 5 times. So, you said you're 63 now. At 68, you'll be out of money.
That's right. Even if you invest, like, let's say
doesn't matter what
you got 10% a year, like it's something crazy.
But now it goes 6 years.
Now now you have one more year.
Or you invest it crazy, and then in year 4 you run out of money because the market goes way down.
What does this guy do? He keeps working.
That guy's. We have this expression called SOL, shit out of luck.
Okay.
So that guy, I said, hey, here's what you can't get 200,000. You can get about 50,000.
Yeah.
And he says, oh my goodness, I can't live on that. And I said, well, I saw your car that you drove in, It was very fancy.
Yeah.
Maybe you can downsize. And you told me that you live in this $2 million house overlooking the ocean. That's the next thing you got to get rid of. And he says, I can't get rid of those. And I said, look, I don't do magic here. I can't help you.
Listen, you're not a magician.
Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of people come to you with this similar problem? Like, this is a lot of money, yeah, but I want to maintain this crazy lifestyle. Maybe he was making 150, 200,000 a year. Is that why?
That's how he came up with that number. He
Yeah.
was making 200 or 250,000 a year.
But you're not going to get a replacement with that. Like early on, what the answer to me would be early on in his career when he started making that, then sit down with you or someone like you.
Yeah, he was way behind the eight ball. I mean,
Yeah.
so really everybody should be saving about 20% of their income if they hope to retire someday. And now you can include in that any government savings plan. So here in the States, we have Social Security. You guys have something similar there in Canada.
Yeah, we have Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security. Right now, they might come to 18 grand a year from that if you worked in if you worked for your whole life and lived in the country for your whole life. So it's not a lot. You said it's similar in the States?
It's pretty similar.
Yeah.
So unless you're going to live really frugally, you better be saving a lot of money.
I just don't understand sometimes. If you have this goal of living on a $200,000 income, but you do nothing to move towards that goal, I mean, do people think, like you said, it is magic? They think that just magic's going to happen. Oh, I'm looking for something like a 20% return. Can I just get my $1 million and make a 20% return and then live off of that for the rest of my life consistently?
Yeah,
illusions.
It's easy sometimes for people to get disconnected. They say, "Oh, well, that guy, he's making so much money, he's just delusional." But it happens to us at all income levels.
I guess so. Yeah.
Right. Whether it's credit card debt, right now it's like I'll put a bunch of money on my credit card. I can't afford this stuff now, but magically in the future I'll be able to afford it plus interest. It's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah. Why? Like, I talk about this all the time. I just feel like we're just so lost when it comes to money, and I want to blame the people who are selling all the products. Get a credit card so you can live your dreams. I mean, but it's not entirely their fault. We have to have some common sense too. If you don't have the ability, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record to anyone who listens to the podcast. But if you don't have the ability to pay off a credit card within a reasonable amount of time, if not right away, it's not a license to spend. It really isn't. And you're right. That's what leads people to the situation that they're in when they come to you with low amounts.
Well, and it really stems down to, it's kind of a, I don't want to get on a soapbox here. It's a little bit of a societal failure. It seems to be persistent all across North America. It's probably similar in other parts of the world. But
absolutely,
you think about where do you learn about finance, right? You don't learn about it in elementary school. You don't learn about it in college. Most people don't learn about it from their parents. And so all of our financial lessons come from whom? Come from the people who are selling these products.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, from Visa, from MasterCard, from American Express, from whomever, giving us from the car dealership saying, yeah, you can buy this car with nothing down. Not only are we not being taught good finances, we're actually being bombarded with terrible financial decision making.
It's like, I don't know, is there a comparison to another industry? I just trying to think about like restaurants. Can we like somehow equate this to like if somebody was just making all of this stuff and nobody told us what was healthy or not, and then McDonald's said just eat here every day and you'll be good.
Well, that's an interesting example, right? So we look at nutrition, right?
Yeah.
My kids are in elementary school right now, and there's a physical education class every day, and they're always bringing stuff home about nutrition, and companies have to publish nutrition data. And yet we talk nothing about personal finance ever, right? I've never seen my kids come home with any homework on personal finance.
I just went to a financial wellness conference, and that
it
is becoming more of a thing now. Corporations are taking on.
Yes. Yeah.
They're seeing, so obviously physical wellness was the first thing, with here's your chiropractic and massage benefits, things like that, health insurance in the States. They see that, obviously that's valuable. And then hopefully the mental health conversation is also being opened up in the States. I feel like it is. I feel like I'm seeing it all over. The financial wellness, so, the facilitator, the organizer of the conference said, I can get anyone to come up here. I could find people to speak about their mental health problems that they had, depression, anxiety. I had an addiction to gambling. That's my story. Yeah. People are more willing to get up and talk about that stuff now than to talk about how they had credit card debt and couldn't pay it off and had to get payday loans. It's still embarrassing, and there's still so much shame. and and it's all cause. It's a loop, right? It's you don't talk about it, so you get further in debt. If you're able to talk about it right away, you think maybe somebody would say, you can actually just get a consolidation loan or go see a debt consolidator or file for bankruptcy. If we talked about it more, people could find the solutions earlier. So the nutrition is so important for kids. Why? Because maybe because there was an obesity epidemic, maybe because people aren't, people are dying or not living as long, people are getting diseases, whatever.
Look at how we all attacked smoking, right? To create awareness of the dangers of smoking.
Yeah.
Imagine if a similar campaign was launched on the dangers of debt.
It's so dangerous. I mean, I don't know the stats, and it probably doesn't take as many lives as smoking, but it takes lives too. That takes lives. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about how people are so destitute that they commit suicide, but it happens. I don't have any statistics on this, but
and anecdotally, I'd have to agree with you, right? I mean,
yes,
the stress that it creates in relationships, in families,
all of it,
in employers, that it does to your health,
ruins lives.
Oh yeah. And like you said, we're so ashamed to talk about it, right?
Let's go back to you getting started in this business. So you were like I was like, I don't want to put my head around this finance stuff. But you seem to have a real passion for it now. How did you get from there to here?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started working with my dad, I was kind of like, all right, I'll give this a try. I don't want to be a mechanic anymore. I don't know what I want to do. I'll work with him. And then I struggled for a lot of years because I couldn't figure out how to articulate to people what they should do with their finances, right? I sort of knew from an intellectual standpoint, but the numbers are such a small part of personal finance, right? And you and I just talked about the shame that comes with money and in these early childhood experiences. And yet, as professionals, we often try to go straight to the numbers.
Yeah.
Hey, you should be saving this much and spending that much.
It's the practical thing, but you're right. It's all emotional. Yeah, it's we should start with that, as you're saying.
It's all behavioral finance. That's really all that matters. And that's why I love, shows like you're doing and that other people are doing, right? Because you're saying, boy, it's not just numbers, right? We're not just going to talk about how to do math here. We're going to talk about the reality of saving's really hard and borrowing is really easy. And how do we reverse that?
Did you stumble across this concept at a certain point and realize the value of it?
It took me a long time to figure it out. I studied enough things, I read enough things, I sort of figured out enough things. And then eventually I like, oh wait, you've got to be able to articulate this in a way that makes sense to people and that they can actually implement. And then once I was able to do that, then I really started seeing people's lives change. And I don't want to be overly dramatic with that, but people that would come in, no matter how much money they had saved, and they were terrified that they were going to run out of money in retirement, and we could say, all right, let's create a plan so you don't. But let's acknowledge the reality that you're afraid of this. And there's no shame in that because everyone's afraid of running out of money. It's in our very DNA. I mean, retirement's a relatively recent phenomenon. What is there records of human civilization for about 10,000 years or so? Only in the last 100 years did anyone ever retire.
Yeah.
Everybody else just worked until they died.
Yeah, and it's because they probably have a lifelong trade and then they pass it on. Right?
That's right.
Like artisans and apprentices and that kind of, the whole idea of retirement, the concept itself is because you didn't like what you were doing or you can't do it anymore. That's the physical aspect of it, right? At 65, you're probably not going to be able to lift things anymore. So, but you did good work for us, so we're going to help you out and take care of you. We're
just not programmed as human beings to manage money, right? I mean, there is no other species on Earth managing money, right?
Yeah,
sort of
not that I know of. But so you came up with this system. Now I'm looking at your website. Were you doing this when you started to take over in 2008? Or did you come up with this?
2008. No. I mean, really sort of 2009, 2010 is where I was able to make that what I call my transformation or my transition. And then I've just been perfecting it since. And now I do a lot of consulting and coaching with other financial advisors, trying to teach them, all right, how do you do this, right? How do you actually, I don't say actually help people, right? Everybody's trying to help people, all the good people are, I guess, but how do you make that effective, right? How do you get past the numbers so that you're actually making change in people's lives?
So you were able to like what was costing you the money at that point before you were about to turn over? Your costs were way too high and you weren't.
Our costs were way too high.
You had clients that
the wrong work. We we had to pay for office space and insurance and taxes and the copy machine and the internet and the cell phones and
so all that, and nobody was really looking at the net. Did you immediately start saying like, I want to focus on a certain type of client so that I can really narrow down what it is I do and do it really well?
Yeah, I did. I mean, before, and a lot of entrepreneurs in all fields make this mistake. They say, "Boy, I'll work with anybody who will pay me." or I work with anybody who'll pay me, right? And there's a bit of a survival there. You've got a mortgage to pay or a family to feed or whatever. But as consumers, we always want to work with specialists, right? We want to work with somebody who knows what I need. And so I began specializing in people that were retiring, within just a year or two or already retired. And I got very good at the needs that they had, which meant that I turned away a lot of business. And that was okay. The more business I turned away, the more I got.
I think I remember you saying in another podcast that you had a minimum amount of people that had come, but then it just kept getting higher as you realized that the amount of money that you might make from managing someone's investments is not worth the time.
Yeah, I started to run into capacity, right? I can only serve so many clients.
That's true. Yeah,
at the level of service that I wanted. So I just started kind of raising the bar there. And a note on specialty, right? A lot of entrepreneurs, like I said, they think they can't specialize. But let's look at the medical field for an example. Let's say that, heaven forbid, you were diagnosed with cancer. You wouldn't go to a cardiologist or a pediatrician, or you would look for an oncologist, right? You would look for someone, and ideally you would look for an oncologist that specializes in the type of cancer that you had been diagnosed with. But as entrepreneurs, we're like, hey, you know what? Whatever ails you, any ailment, come to me, and I will solve that ailment.
I'll figure it out.
No one's interested in that.
Yeah, come to me, and I'll figure it out. But no, you're right. It makes more sense to go to someone who really knows their stuff, and so you were able to, by doing that, you were able to sort of craft it into a practice that you like. And because of the amount of money that people were coming to you, you were able to work out a work-life balance for yourself.
Yeah, I became very committed to a work-life balance. There's this idea of a Calvinistic work ethic, which was some of the kind of the early pioneers or the early pilgrims to the United States, and I imagine a lot of them are in Canada as well. But the Calvinists believed, it was a religious group, they believed that in order to go to heaven, you had to be just incredibly hardworking.
Okay.
And this sort of permeates the American culture and other cultures as well. I don't want to be specific to America, but it's really prevalent here. This idea that if you want to be a good person, whether you're religious or not, then you have to work a lot. And we became so focused on effort that we almost started forgetting about the results.
Yeah.
So people instead, I'll work 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, and the pride almost comes from the number of hours you work.
That makes me a good person.
That's
I
right.
did 80 hours
right.
this week. I'm great.
That's right. I'm doubly as good as somebody who only works 40 hours. And so I sort of work an average of about 20 hours a week and really less most weeks. But
That's
if I'm
awesome.
getting as much done in 20 hours as somebody else is in 60, is the person working 60 hours doing a better job than me? And I would argue, no, I'm far more effective than they are. But as a society, we've sort of said, boy, that person that works 60 hours, they must really be a company man or a company woman, right? They're really putting in the time,
yeah,
even if they're not getting it done.
Oh, I really can't stand that mentality. And I think to look at that and not focus on productivity at all just makes no sense to me. Because they say that 9 to 5, I don't know, maybe you got a couple of hours of real productivity in there. Maybe.
And the studies keep saying less and less. The studies are talking about now that maybe you've got an hour or two of total product time during the entire day.
Oh, no.
And that once you get past, so in the States, 40 hours is considered a typical work week. But that once you get past 40 hours, that your productivity falls dramatically. And that really, in almost every study, somebody working 60 hours is in almost no case getting more done than the person working 40 hours.
So you focus on actually looking at what you needed to have the life that you wanted and what you need to do to achieve that.
Yeah, so I looked at, all right, how do I deliver on my promise to clients, right? That's my number one.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because I've made them a promise that I'm going to deliver a certain level of service, but I didn't promise them that I would do that working 60 hours, right? And no one would actually, as a client, would take that. If I said, boy, don't worry, I'm going to work myself to death for you. No one would be excited by that offer.
Great.
Congratulations, I think.
You're the one for me, and then when you're dead, I'll get somebody else. It's not...
when you get burned out. So instead I say, hey, listen, here's what I'm going to do for you. And I'm always going to deliver on this promise. And in fact, I'm always going to exceed my promise there. And then that's sort of my promise to them. And then for me, I'm saying, all right, well, how do I deliver on that promise with the least amount of effort possible? Now, this isn't like solving for laziness. It's just saying, hey, if I can get it done in 1 hour, it's no benefit to no one for me to spend 4 hours on it. That's
right. It's just waste. It's just empty time when you get to the same result. But this isn't this sounds straightforward, but it would be hard for a lot of people to sit down and do this. So you have a system.
Yeah, so one of the places that really inspired that was when I read Tim Ferriss's legendary book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Talked about a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, just a legendary book. I'm not sure I like his other books quite as much, but that's another story for another day. The 4-Hour Workweek, spectacular book. And for those of us that are entrepreneurs, it can be, at least logistically, very easy to take control of your time. Emotionally, it's a little harder. For those that work, for a company, it's trickier to control your time because someone else is dictating that. But Tim gives examples of how to make that possible. So I started solving for how much am I earning per hour that I work.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just looking at how much I'm earning for a year, well, how does that divide out by my working hours? And is there a way that I can dramatically improve that?
And what were some of the steps, if you can share them?
There's this rule called Parkinson's law, which says that an activity will take as much time as is allocated to it.
Okay.
Kind of another example is backpacking. Those I like
the
to
bigger it is, the bigger it is, the more
stuff
you're
you bring,
going to put in.
right?
Bigger the
no
house.
matter how big your backpack
probably,
is, it's
yeah.
not big enough.
Yeah. Okay. That makes
time
sense.
is the same way. However much time you allocate to something, it will never be enough. So the first thing I started doing is I refused to work on Fridays.
Okay.
And at first it was awful because I was going from 5 days of working to 4, and I had to get all of this work done in 4 days. But I forced myself to find a way, right? Necessity is the mother of innovation. And so I just said, all right, I'm not going to do that. Now, some people will say, boy, that seems pretty dramatic to not work on Fridays. But we all already have those lines. Very few of us are working at 2 a.m. on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Very few of us are taking phone calls in the shower.
Yeah, how did these lines get drawn? But we can't draw our own. We draw these societal lines, but what about the personal lines?
Yeah, so the lines are all made up to begin with. So let's just make up a different line. Let's make up a line that empowers me instead of crushes me.
Sure. So you gave yourself a smaller timeline. Don't they have this program called like the 3-month year or something like that? Do you know what it is? 3 or 4 month where they help you get everything that you were going to get done in your year done in 3 or 4 months, or maybe half the year, and it's just because, like you just said, that's all you have. That's your time. That's your timeline. I really like that idea. Is that you're like, I'm not working Friday. I'm not going to do it. So what do I got to do today to make that happen? And so just working backwards that helped at first. Yeah,
and then another one that I had an opportunity to take my family to China for 3 weeks, deep into China where there's no phone and internet kind of thing. Sure. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to be totally out of pocket for 3 weeks. I better figure this out. So I booked the flights, non-refundable. I was terrified up to the last minute. But I thought, what, this is my chance. I'm just going to find a way to make that work. I'm going to find a way to be gone for 3 weeks. Essentially no phone and no internet. I can kind of relate to this, right? Because like I was just plotting out the podcast guests I was telling you before the show. Yeah. And I know what I want to achieve, a weekly show. And I have a list of people, and now I'm doing all this stuff to make that happen. And if I was just like, oh, I wonder who's going to be on the show next week, I don't know that it would really happen. But you start with the goal and you work backwards. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And you're teaching this to people, is that right? Yeah. So last year I had the opportunity to partner with a gal named Stephanie Bogan, and she and I launched a group coaching program for financial advisors in the States. Well, actually, no, we have advisors from Canada as well. Oh, do you? Okay. Yeah, a couple. It's really a lot of fun. And so it's advisors that want to kind of take control of their practice and have a better work-life balance. And so we, Stephanie and I had originally thought, hey, if we could just get 10 people to sign up, then we could do this thing. Yeah. We put it out there, made a couple of announcements, and then we turned around and 55 people had signed up, and we had to just we had to beat everybody else away with a stick because we couldn't get any more hotel space for our events. That's amazing. And so now we work with these advisors. I was just in Texas last week meeting with the group and teach them, all right, how do you do this? And just like taking the Fridays off, right? You already have these boundaries set up in your life. I don't work Sundays at 2 a.m. I don't take phone calls when I'm in the shower. Let's just expand these boundaries, make them more intentional. And it is about finding clients too that will accept your terms? Yeah, and again, like we talked about with specialties, there's all sorts of clients that will accept those terms, right? If I go to a client and I say, hey, I went to my clients and say, hey, I have this opportunity to take my family to China for 3 weeks. And here's what we're doing to make sure that your service is uninterrupted. Sure. But I also need a little bit of your patience. You're not going to be able to get a hold of me for 3 weeks. And who said no to that? Who called me up and said, Matthew, you're a real bum taking your family to China? Maybe somebody thought that, and I don't want them as a client. But everybody else is saying, boy, I wish I would have done that. I wish I had better boundaries in my own life. Yes, as long as I'm being taken care of. I don't care what my doctor does when he's not seeing me. That's or right. She's not. I just want them to, when they're seeing me, I want them to be there and give their best effort to me. And when they're not seeing me, I don't care what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's up to us to we look to society for permission to do this stuff, and
Yeah,
so
we
that
do.
we don't do this stuff. Oh, well, I'll be frowned upon if I
Yeah.
do that, and who cares, right? First of all, but
Yeah, and nobody else is happy with what they're doing, right? It's not
yeah,
like somebody got together and said, "Boy, this is really how society should run." It was just sort of all by accident.
like why do we need permission from the miserable people to
That's
do what we
right.
want, right? That doesn't make any sense,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Oh, but at least I'm going to be unhappy too, but at least they're going to be okay with that. How
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it's so backwards, and we're all allowed to live the life that we want, and especially like you started you're in an entrepreneurial business. You work for yourself, so if anyone, you should be able to change your practice the way that you want, and that there's some people that find that still to be strange that you have what do they have a name for the type of practice that you have, right?
Kind of a lifestyle practice,
Yeah.
which a lot of people use actually like in a demeaning term.
Okay, this makes no sense, right? Calling something a lifestyle practice, what like what's the alternative? Like I hate my life practice?
Yeah, that's right. Well, again, our industry, like everything, I think, is just human nature. It's all about driving to the next level, right? Next level, and nobody stops to look at the cost. I happen to run into a surgeon on vacation, and this fellow, he's making like $2 million a year. Some really renowned surgeon. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
they could make that much. So the guy's making like $2 million a year. He says, Matthew, I am an amazing provider for my family, but I'm a terrible parent. I only take a max of 2 weeks of vacation a year.
Oh,
So in his industry, he's celebrated because he's making all this money, right? I mean, he must be seeing thousands of patients, doing great things, making all this money, and yet he never sees his family. I mean, how is this guy the hero? But
yeah.
our society would deem him the hero, right? He's hit the highest level of success in his industry, and yet his family is paying the price.
This is really what he values. I think if that's what builds his self-esteem and makes him feel good about himself, being a not so good parent.
Yeah.
And family member, but being great at what he does. I don't know if I'm allowed to judge him for that. I think
I certainly wouldn't, right? Because that's what he's been programmed, right? We've all been programmed. There's kind of this thing, right? The more money you make, the better you must be at something, right?
does he know that that's what he's doing? Like that's the thing I want to make sure. I want to make sure
Yeah.
that he's actively making this choice. Like family,
I
not so
doubt it.
important. Work, definitely important. Money, definitely important. Spending the money, not so important. Having the money, very important. Like, is he going through this checklist? Because
No,
if,
I doubt it. I
right?
really doubt it. He seemed like a real sincere guy. I mean, he kind of said it in sort of a remorseful way. I can't imagine that as a teenager, he thought, I'm going to go to medical school and become a doctor and a renowned surgeon all across the world so that I can never see my family.
Right?
I
Nobody
I
sets
can't
these
imagine that.
goals.
Yeah, I'd like to never see my family.
So
But if your goal on the wall is make as much money as you can, then everything falls in behind that.
well, yeah, good for you for making that a priority. It's not everybody's priority to spend some people love work, right? And I get
Yeah,
that.
sure.
And if that's the choice that they make, great. And I mean, you want to balance and you want to have family members and if you have kids, you want to have a family that understands that. And if that's great, great. I just don't understand why it's so hard for people. I'm sorry. I do understand. I understand why it's hard for people to change. Change is hard.
Oh, change is
Right?
very hard.
It's really, really hard. And I think it's our job, mine and yours, because you've done this, to keep talking about it so it can be more normalized. And, you do need less money when you're living the life that you want. You are able, but I mean, even though you need less money, you're not living on less money. You're doing very well on your clients, correct?
Yeah, I'm blessed. I've got, a great lifestyle and great financial success, but at the same time, I'm not perfect at this either, right? For example, I live in Washington State, not Washington, the capital of the United States, but Washington State. It's over by British Columbia.
Yeah.
And I've lived here my whole life. Why? I don't know. I was born here. I was raised here. I don't particularly care for the rain that we get all the time. It's always cloudy, but I just have never had the courage to move somewhere else. So I don't want to sound like I'm on my high horse saying, boy, I'm intentional about everything in my life. There are plenty of things I'm not intentional about. I just happen to be intentional about my lifestyle as far as time I take off work.
Well,
So
and
I still have a lot of room to improve.
sure, but you also still have a lot of life to live. How old are you?
36.
Yeah,
So I'm still
36.
trying to get this figured out. I got
You're
a couple years
still, from
figure it out.
some people's perspectives, you're still a baby. So you're still.
That's what I try to tell myself. My kids don't believe it, but
And so how many kids do you have now?
I have 3 kids. I have 2 girls and a boy. They are 12, 9, and 7.
That's great. You started early. Wow.
I wanted to
Wait.
be done.
Yeah. Early 20s. Wow. Thanks so much for coming on the show and
Thanks for
talking about
having
this
me.
stuff. Because I think people, just because you're not Canadian doesn't mean what you're talking about is not valuable. We didn't talk about what investments, and we didn't get into 401ks and IRAs and stuff. And, it doesn't have to be all Canadian based stuff, because we're just talking about life and general tips and values, right?
Yeah, and we all share that same human condition, right? I mean, our cultures might be a little bit different, and they certainly are in some areas, but right, we all come from that same evolutionary chain, which is you got to work all the time, lest the famine come, right? Lest the crops stop growing and you die. And so we sort of get caught up in that in our core. And like you mentioned, Bo, we've got this culture of shame around money, and that you can't talk about it unless you want to show that you've got more money than somebody else, right? Unless your car is better than somebody else's, and then it's okay somehow.
Yeah, we have skewed values, I think.
We do.
We got to start changing them. So yeah, I'm really I'm glad that you got an upgrade to your hotel that had a grand piano in Dallas.
Go down and play it. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I got this email at FinCon last October, right? It was October.
Yeah. And
it's like, hey, if anybody knows how to play piano, I just got upgraded to this room that has a grand piano in it, or just like the suite that was attached.
Yeah, some hospitality
suite. And I said, I'll come play that piano. I love to play any piano if it's there. So hey, and you're very appreciative, and everybody's singing along.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, didn't we?
It was fun, yeah. And this is how you meet people. You go and do things.
Yeah.
Right? Don't just stay at home. Go to a conference. Respond to emails, go and meet people you never have, and put yourself out there, and then we make connections. So I'll see you at FinCon in September, if not before.
Yeah, I hope so. I'll be down in Florida in September, where FinCon is. We're starting a 1.5-year long boat trip. So
what?
That's where we're kicking it off from. Yeah.
Oh,
but that's a
nice.
podcast for another day.
That is that. Oh wow, let's talk. We'll talk more about that. But yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay. So I have so many follow-up questions, but I'll save them.
I want to put that teaser out there for your
just
audience.
Put it out there.
The
boat trip. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matt Jarvis, Jarvis Financial. And if you are in the Washington State area, look him up. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Hey, take care.
You too. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It would mean a lot to me, and it only takes a few seconds. For the show notes and any links from the episode, head over to my website, investwisely.ca. And while you're there, please feel free to send me a message on my contact page. Thanks so much for listening to The Personal Finance Show. I'll be back next week with Laurie Campbell, CEO of Credit Canada.